You're listening to Wildlife Control Consultant, where we provide research-based information on all things related to vertebrate pest management. Hi everyone, Stephen Vantassel here, Wildlife Control Consultant, bringing another episode of the Wildlife Control Consultant podcast. Hey, glad to have you on board. Hope you're doing well. If you're wondering what the Wildlife Control Consultant podcast is all about, well, we provide research-based information on all things related to vertebrate pest control. That's animals with a spine. So, as I said last week, I'm trying to get ahead on my podcast, so I'm recording here about mid-October, so trying to push the calendar out in front. So things are kind of slowing down for me a little bit, but trying to just get ahead of the game here. So one project that I am involved with, I got this trap, just to kind of give you a little heads up on this one. I got this trap from the manufacturer. Hopefully you can see that. It's called the Thanos automatic trap kit, and it is checking it out. So we don't really have rats in my particular area, but I'm checking it out to see if it works on mice. And so clearly the device will kill mice. There's no doubt about that. But I wanted to see if I can attract them to get up inside. So I'm having to play with some baits, as well as trying to make it so that the mice can get up into that near the striker rod and get hit with the striker. So I'm excited about that. So checking it out, and plus doing a little bit of bait work, trying to come up with a proper bait that will really attract that mouse to stand up and get his head crushed, basically. So, but enough of that. If you're looking to get a hold of me, you can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. You can also check me out on my website at wildlifecontrolconsultant.com. We have some materials for you if you're looking to expand your knowledge in the area of vertebrate pest control. I have the Vertebrate Pest Handbook, the Wildlife Pest Control Handbook, the Wildlife Removal Handbook, and the Wildlife Damage Inspection Handbook, and then Being Kind to Animal Pests, which discusses how to use cage and box traps more humanely. A lot of people have the mistaken view that cage and box traps are automatically humane. Not true. I mean, I'm sure the animal rights protest industry wants you to think that way, but the fact is they are not. So about how to make sure you're using them appropriately so you can reduce animal suffering and animal death. Of course, my other book would be The Practical Guide to the Control of Feral Cats. So cats, of course, free-range cats are an environmental menace in the United States, so we certainly need to manage more of them, and this book will talk about some tactics and techniques on doing that as well. Okay, well, I've been doing, last week I talked about bait stations, which was part 3 in my series on bait stations. As what you know, bait stations are designed to help protect rodenticides and toxic baits from getting from non-target access, right? So trying to make sure that they're being used more safely. But so we're not really talking about how to keep your bait safe from non-targets. It's about how do we use bait stations and look at the design of bait stations and the location of bait stations to be sure that the bait station box itself is not preventing the target animal, that is the commensal rodents, the mice and the rats, from getting into the station and being attracted to it that we want. Because while on one hand bait stations are a protective piece of equipment, they are also a barrier to control as well. We want to make sure we enhance the safety of the bait stations, right? But that's not the topic of this presentation. But on the other side is also making sure that we are enhancing the attractiveness of the bait for the target animal. And are there different types of bait station designs that do that? And so that's been part of this particular work. Last week talked about the role of odor in your bait station, and so this week we're going to look at something else. So let me pull my PowerPoint up here and get that going. So hope you're going to enjoy. This week is going to be a little bit longer, a little bit more information. So we're looking specifically at the use of bait stations for Norway rats. Now, the tendency now is to stop calling them Norway rats. I guess it's offensive to Norwegians. If you're not aware of the story, it was originally, there was some competition between the United Kingdom and Norway, and so they called the rats Norway rats as a way to kind of get over on them. Things, people, when it comes to money and trade, people do some crazy things, to be sure. So the move now is to call them brown rats or sewer rats rather than calling them Norway rats, because it's sort of a dig on Norway. And the key is the Norway rat doesn't even come from Norway, right? So it's kind of hilarious that way. But the tradition, I'm a little bit more of a traditionalist, but Norway rats, anyways, I believe the article uses the word Norway, but understand they're not from Norway, and it was originally, the moniker was given to the rat by the United Kingdom to sort of denigrate the Norwegians. So there's a little bit of funny there, but nevertheless, so this is the booklet that I'm drawing this information from. Again, this is not my research. I haven't done this research. Basically, I am summarizing materials that you may not be familiar with, right? So we're trying to give you the highlights from it, so you don't have to read it yourself, but you can gain the benefit and advantage of this material, so you can improve the control that you're using for your clients to manage these brown rats, okay? And so the article's called The Bait Station Preferences of Norway Rats. It's by E.B. Spurr, C.E. O'Connor, G.A. Morris, J. Turner, and it's published by the Landcare Research out of Lincoln, New Zealand. I'd just be blunt with you, New Zealand does some amazing stuff and some of their research, and the reason they do so much of this is because they're trying to eradicate the invasive species on their island collection. I don't know if it's an archipelago, but nevertheless, they have a series of islands. That's what New Zealand is. And they're trying to protect their native species by getting rid of these invasive species. And one of those, of course, is Norway rats. Norway rats can be devastating for ground nesting birds and other animals in an environment that hasn't adapted to protecting themselves from it, right? So, Landcare Research from Lincoln, New Zealand, and it's published in 2006 from the Department of Conservation of New Zealand. So it's essentially kind of a quasi-private company. I think it's a nonprofit that was sort of contracted probably by the Department of Conservation to do this sort of work. So the research they do down there is simply phenomenal. It is impressive, to say the least. And so I just have to give them kudos for that. They do some incredible work. So this is the information you're getting is based on the booklet that they've created. So I've tried to pull out things that I thought were the most relevant for our purposes here in the control of Norway rats on a commercial setting. So what they did was they looked at 4 different types or designs of bait stations. Now you may look at this and you're saying, oh, Stephen, I would never use some of these bait stations because they're not secure. I get that, right? And the purpose of this is don't look at it in the sense of how well do these designs protect against non-targets. What the research is looking for is they're trying to figure out, is there a design that is more attractive to rats? And if they find that design, then it would be constructed in a manner that would be hardened against other non-targets, right? But you got to figure out what the test is all about, right? Which design is going to work the best. And so basically they have a yellow corrugated pipe, okay, plastic pipe. You can see there in the upper left. These are in black and white. Then you have your protective bait station. Of course, if you're familiar with Bell Labs, this is their station. And we're using metric here because that's the standard they're using in Australia, right? So it's millimeters. And then they use basically a white plastic bottle. Now, when I look at it, it looks like a container that would have had kitty litter in it, except it's a wide mouth container, right? Not something that'd be a little bit smaller that we use in the U.S. So, wide mouth container, white plastic bottle, and you can see the dimensions there. And then lastly, what they called was the wooden motel. And they had basically this rather large wooden box with openings in it, right? And so this was the 4 designs that they tested. And of course, their goal is to figure out which one was the most attractive to invading Norway rats, because their goal was, all right, we've eradicated the rats, or maybe the rats have never been in this part of the area. So if we have, like, maybe there's a shipwreck or there's an outbreak of Norway rats, perhaps they jumped off a ship at a bar harbor or something, and we have to sort of inundate the area with bait stations, which one would be the most attractive for invading Norway rats to explore? So this is an important distinction. So this is different than thinking about Norway rats that are already established in an area. Typically, when pest control is called to a location, they're not called in advance, right? That's very rare for customers to ever call us before there's a problem. Typically, they're calling us after there's been a problem and the problem has been going on for an extended period of time, right? But that's not what this study was looking for. They're looking for where would the rats go if they're new to the area, which bait station design would they begin to check out. So this is an important distinction, okay? So fresh. The rats are new to the area, not established. And so their study method is they had basically 3 pens, and the rats would be tested individually. So they would bring the rats into this particular area and have them check out the bait station. They would be left there. So the pens were used in order. So one pen would be used 2 times, but it would be 6 weeks in between before a rat was put back into the original area. So they would just sort of round robin the rats around to the various bait stations, but one area would have to be used twice with that rat, but it would be 6 weeks before that rat came back to the original pen that it was started with, okay? So they didn't know. One issue that they couldn't account for was if you're reusing a pen that the rat's already been to, what is the confounding effect of odors there? And of course they couldn't account for that. Okay, so keep that in mind. They are reusing the pens, but there is a 6-week gap between those uses. Here are those results. Okay, so the time given for the rat to approach the bait station. So remember what the situation is. There's a little pen. The rat is introduced to the pen, and there's a bait station in that pen. How long did it take for the rat to key in on that bait station and to check it out? All right, that's what they mean by the time to first approach. Okay, so you can see the black plastic box on the left. That would be the protective station. The average time here was about 25 minutes. Okay, the wooden motel, the average time was about 20 minutes. The white plastic bottle, it took the rat about 45 minutes. And then, of course, the yellow plastic pipe, it took almost 50 minutes. That's not too good, right? I mean, if it's kind of slow, and we want the rat to go in as quick as possible. So, how long did it take for the rat to enter, right? So we have the approach, but that's good. That's important. I mean, they have to approach before they enter, but we're really concerned about how long did it take for the rat to enter the bait station, right? Because if we put rodenticide inside, we want the rat to go inside to get it, right? So how long did it take? So the black plastic box, it only took the rat, about 6 to 7 hours. With the wooden motel, almost 10 hours. With the white plastic bottle, it took almost 30 hours. And then the yellow plastic pipe, it took about 8 hours. So obviously the white plastic pipe bottle is not doing too well here. All right, so let's find out how many of the rats tested entered the bait stations, right? So we want high numbers here. What proportion? So if there's 100 rats that they tested, what proportion of those rats ultimately entered the bait station? Because the reality is not all of them did enter a bait station. So the plastic box, that's the protector, that's almost 80% of the rats entered that box. The wooden motel, you have almost 90%. The white plastic bottle, only about 50%. And then the yellow plastic pipe, almost 90%. Okay, we're starting to get some information here that could be useful for us. Okay, how long did they stay inside the bait station? Right, because we want the rat to linger long enough to eat the bait. Right, and so we want them to approach quickly, we want them to enter quickly, but we need them to stay inside, not just enter and leave. We need them to stay inside and to feel comfortable enough to linger to eat the bait, right? So with the plastic box, they stayed about 10 seconds. And with the wooden motel, 70 seconds. And then with the white plastic bottle, about another 10 seconds. And of course, the yellow plastic bottle, a little bit more than 10 seconds. So clearly, the wooden motel shot the lights out. Okay. So now, how many times did the rodent come back? How many times did they come back and enter? Because we not only need them to visit. What if we're using a first-generation anticoagulant? The rodent needs to enter multiple times to get multiple feeding. We want them to not only enter quickly and linger, we want them to come back like a repeat customer. Okay. Well, the plastic box, we have almost 8. Wooden motel, though, is up to about 9. White plastic bottle, 1. And then the yellow plastic pipe, almost 8. Not very good at all. Now, feeding behavior. Did they feed inside of the station? And the answer, they weren't using any toxic bait, as I recall, in this particular study, because they didn't want it to interfere with their future behavior. So they have time about how long they stayed, but did they actually eat anything when they were inside? 2 of the stations, the answer was yes. The yellow tube and the wooden hotel. Interestingly, they didn't eat inside of the Protecta, and they didn't eat inside of the white container, the white bottle. So, what do we draw from all of this? Well, the white plastic bottle did the absolute worst. It had the only one entrance, and it had the smallest entrance. For purposes of the control of invading Norway rats, you'd want to use a yellow plastic pipe or the wooden motel. Now let me go back and show you what those look like, right? So you'd want to use the plastic pipe, and you'd want to use the wooden motel. So what are some things we might be able to glean from this? Is there something about a tube? Well, of course, Norway rats go through tunnels all the time. Their burrow is basically a tunnel. So it's going to be very comfortable for them to go through a tube of that size. And also, you're wondering about the wooden motel. Is it something about the texture of the wood? Does it feel warm or not foreign? When you think of plastic, right? Is plastic noisy to them? All of our bait stations are plastic, right? Typically, is that a hindrance to rats? Obviously, not all rats, because we're killing rats with our bait stations, but we're trying to enhance the attractiveness of our bait stations while still protecting the bait. So, is there something about wood that rats like? Of course, we know that pheromones could be deposited inside of the wood, right? It's going to absorb that. Even if you paint it, there's going to be some absorption there. But is there something different about having a wooden box with 4 entrances that's more attractive to a rat than the plastic Protecta? These are things you want to be thinking about, right? They didn't answer all of those questions. All it says is, here's the results. And what were those results again? The white plastic bottle did the worst, okay? No shock there. But the ones that did the best were yellow plastic pipe and the wooden motel. Now, there's something there we may be able to draw in our own, for our own experience. So this is where you want to be thinking about your bait station use. Is there a modification that can be made there? What if we had a wooden base inside of our plastic bait stations, right? Is that something that someone may want to play with? Would that help enhance rodent control? I don't know the answer to that, right? But some of you are good workmen, and you have the ability to handle, you have wood shops that you can do that. How hard would it be to sort of create a little get a thin piece of wood and carve it with a jigsaw or something, and then just drop it into the floor, so when a rat's coming in, he's not touching plastic, he's touching wood? Would that make a difference? I don't know, but it would be an interesting question to find out. Or what if we were using a yellow plastic pipe? What if we would a PVC pipe work? Or is that just not, is that too rigid, too stiff, too much like a plastic bait station? Is there something about, maybe there's a little curve to it that makes a rat feel better or more natural? I don't know. But this is something you might want to think about. If we're not thinking about things differently, we're just going to keep doing the same thing and getting the same results. That's what research is trying to help us do, is to think about things in a different way. So maybe we can find a breakthrough. And when you find a breakthrough, now you have a competitive advantage over your competition, right? So if you're doing everything as the same as everybody else, how are you going to differentiate? How are you going to find a lower cost, higher efficiency program that can improve your profits without increasing your prices? That's when you become a category killer, right? The goal is not just to drive down prices, although that may be a benefit. The goal is to only drive down prices if your profit margin or your income grows. And it's very hard in this field, but if we're not thinking about things differently, we're never going to find those benefits, right? As I've said before, you want to be looking at 3 to 5% of your jobs where you're tweaking something and doing a little bit of an experiment to see what kind of results that you get, and where you're trying stuff out, not to harm your client, right? But you have situations where you have a little bit of flexibility, where you're just trying something different to see if you're getting different results. Or better, and hopefully better results. Well, I hope you found that information helpful. Again, that came from New Zealand. It's some fascinating stuff about thinking about what type of station is more attractive to a brown rat than other types of stations. So think about that if you're doing some brown rat or Norway rat control. I'm Stephen Vantassel. You've been listening to the Wildlife Control Consultant Podcast. Do take a few moments, if you would, to subscribe to the channel. Tend to publish about once a week. And of course, if you have questions, comments, suggestions for future shows, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. If you're interested in being on the show, you can also do take a few moments and review my podcast on how to be on the show. But also, once you've viewed that, then reach out to me, and we'd love to schedule a time, talk about your product, your service, or whatever you have in mind to get your word out to a wider audience. We love having guests on the show. We'd love to hear from you. Again, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Well, getting colder out there, so be careful. Those of you in the south are certainly going to enjoy probably cooler temperatures, to be sure. Nevertheless, make sure you're being safe out there. And till next time, take care, everyone. This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant Podcast. Vertebrate pest control is an inherently dangerous activity involving risk of bodily injury to you, others, and or property. Vertebrate pest control also involves legal issues, so be sure to always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and or other control methods when controlling pests. Wildlife Control Consultant LLC, Stephen M. Vantassel, or their affiliates are not responsible for your use of the information provided here. Always consult a qualified and appropriate professional before employing the information provided here.